Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Former President Donald Trump has once again been elected to become the new President of the United States of America as the 47th President of the United States of America. And most recently we saw there was a tough battle between the Democrat candidate Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, of course. Now, this is the transition period that is underway at the moment as we speak. And on 20th of January, President Donald Trump will be taking over the power as the 47th President of the U.S. What is going to be happening as far as foreign policy front, specifically when we talk about vis-a-vis China policy, is going to be for the next 4 years. We've also seen in the last tenure, from 2016 to 2020, during President Trump's presidency, the U.S. imposed trade tariffs on the Chinese goods, which actually triggered a trade war. Then we'll also be delving deeper into as to what could be the potential national security priorities as far as the Trump administration is concerned during his second presidency. In another major development, we have seen President Xi Jinping of China and the incumbent U.S. President Joe Biden have met during the APEC summit in Lima, Peru, and they have discussed a wide range of issues. Now, they've also talked about how this particular bilateral relationship, the dialogue and cooperation between the two sides was put on the right track. We are trying to we'll try to understand that what was the shift as far as the China policy under Trump administration was concerned and how it shifted during the President Joe Biden's and what could be expected for the next 4 years. For that, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, his former ambassador. Mr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to be joined by Mr. Khalid Taimur Akram, international relations expert. Mr. Akram, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Let's begin with you, Mr. Khan. Now, the first Trump presidency and the second Trump presidency, we are going to see what sort of policies on the foreign policy front as former President Donald Trump, now the president-elect to become the 47th President of the United States of America. The imposition of tariffs on multiple goods from China triggered a trade war between the US and China. Firstly, let's take a stock how Trump's policy towards China was in his first tenure.
In the first tenure, it was a tumultuous relationship, to say the least. And the tariffs did cause a trade war, which had an impact on global economies and global security as well. This time around, during the election campaign, Donald Trump has also been saying that I will impose between 60% to 100% tariffs. And if that goes through, I'm sure China will retaliate in some way or the other. And the relationship might go in a downward spiral. But having said that, in the previous administration in 2019, they came to a phase one of a trade agreement, which China was not able to live up to because in 2020 you had the COVID-19 pandemic. But this time around, there is a possibility that the Chinese might offer another trade deal before you impose sanctions tariffs unilaterally. So these are things that are very important. They will have a global impact. Apart from that, the security issues that you were talking about, there's the problem in the Taiwan Straits, there's the problem in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and there have been, in the last administration, for instance, when Donald Trump became president, he got a call from the president of Taiwan, and he took that call, which was about a 12-minute call or so. This really angered the Chinese, as a result of which they held back calling Donald Trump until he had made a statement that the US still believes in the one China policy. So this time around, there are three major issues. the trade issues that include what the Americans believe are unfair trade practices and jobs that are lost to China, American jobs. And then there is this issue of the security. In the South China Sea, China has not only concerns regarding the Straits of Malacca, which is a very narrow area where shipping, important shipping can easily be stopped, but they also have their concerns about Quad, which is an alliance that is primarily a security alliance, which includes Japan, India, United States and Australia. So these are issues which people are still concerned about. Then there's the issue of whether China might take over Taiwan, and in such a case, what would the American reaction be? And the third factor is that of cybersecurity and hacking and intellectual property rights, because you might remember the case of Huawei and the 5G wars. So these are issues that are outstanding. Now, apart from that, when you look at what Donald Trump was talking about during the elections, he is very keen to end the wars in the Ukraine and in the Middle East. Now, they will also be, the Americans will be keenly looking at China's conduct vis-a-vis their relationship with Russia, with Iran, with North Korea, and with some of the countries in the Middle East, and whether they are going to be an obstacle in this path to stopping the war, or whether they are going to be a partner who will facilitate Donald Trump, will again depend on the outcome of the relationship that you have.
Right, Mr. Akram, when we try to compare as to what U.S. policy towards China during Trump's first tenure as compared to the incumbent administration's tenure the last 4 years, how different both were, or were both the same as far as the China's policy is concerned, particularly vis-a-vis when it comes to those security issues which have already been mentioned by Mr. Khan, and also in terms of trade?
Yes, I would agree with Ambassador Khan that last time Trump started with a very bumpy relationship with China by taking a telephone call from Taiwan, then placing restrictions on ZTE and Huawei, and then declaring Chinese cotton, the Chinese Xinjiang cotton, which is considered to be the best in the world, to be restricted in US. And these kind of restrictions, we saw lots of restrictions by the US federal government. In total, during the Trump's time, there were 210 sorts of restrictions were put on Chinese trade, on Chinese companies, on visa regime, and many other things. And at the same time, we saw Donald Trump giving number of statements during this time, also during his election campaign. He wants that for 4 years to put a ban on import from China. He wants to increase the tariff without realizing this thing that if the tariffs are increased, then it's going to have implication within US, because the buyers will have to buy the same things at a higher price. I feel that Donald Trump this time will have to face with a more strengthened China, because China has, in last 4 years, China has gained a lot of space in the international diplomacy. China was instrumental in bringing Saudi Arabia and Iran together. China has been successful in expanding BRICS. China has been successful in expanding Shanghai Cooperation Organization. China is the one which has got together all the factions of Palestinian movement together, and China made them sit together, and so that if tomorrow there is a Palestine voice or Palestine agreement signed with Israel, it has to be one voice of all the Palestinian people. So neglecting China will not be an option for Donald Trump. But of course, as we know his nature and the erratic decisions which he had been taking in the past, so we may see some kind of erratic decisions regarding China. As far as the Biden administration is concerned, we have seen that in initial 3 years of his tenure, Biden did not pay any attention to China. The first time President Xi Jinping and Joe Biden met was during the APEC meeting last year during the same time. And at that time, Biden decided to give a friendship hand to China, but that was too late because the Biden administration had practically wasted 3 years. And we also saw that the 200 restrictions which were placed during the Trump time, Biden administration did not take any interest in lifting them. And although President Biden and President Xi Jinping just had a meeting at Lima, and now they are going to probably meet again in Brazil also during G20, but these meetings are meaningless because China also knows that this administration will be going another 60 days. So China is looking forward for a smooth transition, and this time we hope that President Trump will act more mature and he will take China along with him if he has to resolve the Ukraine issue, and if he has to work on international politics, then this time he has to give more weight to China.
Now, Mr. Khan, when we talk about, as Mr. Akram has talked about, this time around, Donald Trump will have to give more weightage to China. China is more strengthened with more strength from BRICS, also the expansion of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But if he doesn't do that and he goes even tougher this time around on China, what are going to be the implications, specifically when we talk about the trade relations between the two? What sort of implications it is going to have for the US in particular?
You see, although China in this period has managed to create much larger markets outside the United States, but even then the United States remains the largest export market and is a very, very important destination for Chinese goods. On the other hand, you must remember that the rise of China started when American policy on companies from America who wanted to be competitive in the world were looking for cheaper labor to keep their goods more competitive. That's why they went and invested in China. There are still very large investments in China, and those investments still continue to make those companies higher profits and make them more competitive. Secondly, as China has grown economically, China itself is a very lucrative market. So these are things that need to be considered. They need to be very, very important. As far as the Americans, the American public is concerned, when you talk about jobs, American jobs going to China, I don't think that that trend is continuing at that pace. And a lot of the jobs that were lost in America were actually due to things like automation and artificial intelligence. When you want to make your company more competitive, then you have to embrace modern technologies, and these jobs are going to be lost to that. I must point out that a lot of the jobs that were lost because of the environmental concerns in this administration will probably be coming back, because one of the slogans was drill baby drill, which means I'll open up a lot more oil exploration ventures and pipelines and things like that. So obviously that will also create jobs. But in answer to your question, the relationship, no step should be taken in this relationship which is an impulsive one or a populist one. The whole relationship needs to be thought out carefully, and they should go back to the first phase of the trade agreement that they had in 2019 and see how they need to tweak that and come to an agreement where both sides are benefiting from it, and especially the American public benefits from it. Because as I said, a trade war not only harms these two countries, it has a global impact on the economies of all kinds of countries. And more than anything else, as far as the American public is concerned, it will raise prices in America. So inflation already is a major problem in the United States. Supply chains, energy costs, all these things have an impact on the food inflation, which is a huge issue in the United States. So these things have to be thought out very carefully. Having said that, Donald Trump personally is fond of strong leaders, of people who have control over their countries. And he has mentioned this about President Xi Jinping. And he's also called President Xi Jinping a friend. So I'm also hoping that on a personal level, when they meet sooner rather than later, they will come to a better understanding. Although I must also say that there will be hawks, China hawks, in the Trump administration who are very keen to take a much less flexible stance. And then there are also concerns that in the Ukraine war, as far as Russia and Russia's policy, American policy towards Russia is concerned, they are not happy that China is providing them assistance, not only in parts and things, but financially by continuing to trade with them. So those sanctions that were put on Russia are not very effective as far as the Americans are concerned. And they would blame, the hawks would blame China for this.
So those were the accusations made by Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State under Biden administration. Of course, they've been denied by Chinese on a number of occasions. Rather, Chinese have come up with a 12-point peace proposal as far as the resolution of the Ukraine conflict is concerned. So on one side, we see this 12-point peace proposal on the part of the Chinese to resolve Ukraine crisis. On the other side, we see how Donald Trump talked about NATO and the Ukraine crisis, and he also said that he, after becoming the president, he will end this war within 24 hours. So is there any sort of an alignment of the understanding of the two when it comes to resolution of Ukraine crisis in particular?
You mean China and the United
Donald Trump.
States?
And Donald Trump.
And
United
Donald
States
Trump.
under Trump.
It is possible. It is possible. Although again, the hawks say that it is not in the interest of China for this war to end very quickly. In fact, there are many of them who also say that even Russia wants to continue. Russia is not interested in peace. The longer this war goes on, as far as they can see, they will be able to make greater gains. But Donald Trump, as President of the United States, will be a very powerful man, and he will have his influence not only on NATO, but on Putin as far as their personal relationship goes as well.
Mr. Akram, you already pointed out that it was some sort of a delay on the part of Biden administration when it comes to reaching out to China. And last year we saw that particular meeting happening in San Francisco between President Biden and President Xi Jinping. Was that delay, or the time loss that you already mentioned, was that deliberate on the Biden's administration?
I think yes, because the Biden administration remained very offensive towards China. We saw that they did not, although they had changed many policies which were started by Trump. For example, the immigration policy, the policy with Mexico and policy with Latin America, Trump was very hard on them. But the Biden administration was not that hard on them. But at the same time, with China, they kept all the policies which were taken by Trump administration. And we saw during the Biden administration, we saw that they did not give any kind of relaxation to the Chinese side. We saw the chief financial officer of Huawei imprisoned in Canada for almost 1.5 years. And then after the start of the Ukraine war, we never saw US reaching out to China for mediation or anything. US had been going solo everywhere. US had been trying to veto the Palestinian resolution, which was initially supported by China during the in the UN Security Council also. So the Biden administration did not grade China where they should have been. We saw very recently, we saw US Secretary of State going to China and advising China. It was quite funny to me that they advised China that you are going over capacity. They said, okay, bring your capacity to our level so that we can compete you. How can you say to a country which has worked really hard to reach to that capacity? The supply chain in China, the US companies going to China, China has not been asking them to come over here, starting from iPhone to the t-shirts and shirts and shoes, everything which is sold in US is Chinese made. It is one of the reason is this, because US in last 20 years after 9/11, they have been concentrating on the defense industry. Right now the US economy stands on their defense industrial complex, and more wars in the world, the more US economy flourishes, whereas the Chinese economy is now totally based on their trade. And we must remember one thing, that now 155 countries and 30 organizations have already joined the Belt and Road Initiative. All the Latin American countries are practically part of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, and the Chinese president's concept of the community of shared future. Then we saw in last 4 years he has given the concept of global development initiative, global security initiative, global civilization initiative. So this time once Trump is going to come in power, he is going to see a very new China, because China's presence in African countries, China's presence in Latin America has increased a lot in last 4 years. And now I think the US administration should, among themselves, they should sit and they should revisit the policy about China. And as I said before, that there will be no solution of Ukraine war or in Palestine issue without the active support of the Chinese.
So if more tougher stance on the part of a new Trump administration continues, what sort of implications it's going to have in terms of the implications on trade front in
yes,
particular?
on trade front, China is, of course, China is going to have a setback, because their products, if they land up in US, and they will have more tariffs. So basically the consumer will get affected. But if Donald Trump decides to impose more sanctions on China, like for example, they can go to WTO for imposing sanctions, they can sanction Chinese cotton, they can sanction Chinese products. They are already in process of sanctioning Chinese chip, because you know there is a chip war also going on between China and America, because all the chips were they were made either in China or in Taiwan. But now US and Germany in particular, in European countries, they have made a big chip market. But China is using their local chips even in iPhone, because they are made in China. So will Donald Trump be able to convince his big business people to pull out of China? No. And we must, during this election, we saw a lot of role of Elon Musk. He is now he is very close to Donald Trump right now, and I see his big role in his administration, especially on the business side, on the trade side. And we saw, and we see that right now China has accumulated the biggest reserves of lithium, and lithium is needed for the green energy, and especially Elon Musk, he needs lithium, because his Tesla project is now going very fast. So all these things would accumulate, and I think this time Donald Trump will be forced to take a moderate view of China, and particularly people like Elon Musk and the business people around him will be forcing him to take lenient steps towards China.
Right, Mr. Khan, now there is a statement by the Chinese embassy after this particular recent interaction between the two presidents that this relationship has remained stable on the whole, although there were certain ups and downs. So comparing it with the former Trump administration's tenure, was it more stable? Because this particular statement goes on to say that at least 20 communication mechanisms were either established or opened or re-established between the two.
Well, the thing is that the Biden administration has certainly been more stable in their policies. In some cases, they have ignored important partners around the world. That's another story. But at least they are predictable to some extent. In the case of Donald Trump, relationships have been often based on impulsive decisions or personal likes and dislikes, and they have often confused and flabbergasted some of the people who are in this relationship. But at the end of the day, as far as his relationship with countries is concerned, I think those countries which will offer a good business deal, which will flatter Donald Trump enough, which will create opportunities for investments, or they will conduct large arms deals, will probably endear themselves more to Donald Trump. So it's a different dynamics, a different way of conducting foreign policy. And in fact, Mr. Donald Trump considers it a strength of his that he is unpredictable and that he is impulsive. So it keeps his protagonists or his antagonists on the back foot or on tenterhooks.
Okay, so Mr. Khan, how important is to this relationship the continuation of stability, if that has been brought under Biden administration during this particular transition period till 20th of January when the new president takes over?
No, there is no guarantee for stability. There are lots of concerns that this relationship may go into a downward spiral. But I pointed out the factors that will prevent this from happening, because at the end of the day, there will be vested interests who will try to bring some sense into it.
So how do you look at
and there will be areas which will be of mutual benefit. So there has to be a comprehensive trade deal that should be worked out, rather than taking unilateral steps against which China will be compelled to retaliate. So it is something which will cause a harm to both sides, and I'm hoping very much that it will be done in a more organized and less impulsive manner.
China feels compelled to retaliate. What could be the possible manifestations of that retaliation?
They will also make tariffs in retaliation. They will prevent American goods and parts from coming in. So, you know, it's just going to be something that will escalate.
So, okay, so far we've been able to comprehensively compare the policies under the Trump's administration and Biden's administration. How Chinese had been viewing under these two different administrations this particular bilateral relationship, and how did they strategize in order to deal with two different presidents?
You see, it's a difference in personalities. As far as the Biden administration was concerned, there weren't any major initiatives taken during this administration. It was more or less business as usual, and they didn't irritate China too much, but they didn't welcome China or give them any advantages as opposed to the previous Donald Trump regime. So it was a lack of interest, basically. Maybe they had other priorities in foreign policy, I'm not sure. But Donald Trump is very focused on China, and Donald Trump has been talking endlessly during his election campaign on China. And it's very important to note that the things he says during the election campaigns, there are very powerful algorithms that actually inform him of what public opinion really is within the United States. So sometimes some of the things he says might surprise you, but all that comes from a very comprehensive machinery that feeds him the sound bites. What is it that people really think? And that comes not from the public polls that you get. Because in a public poll, if I ask you a question and your answer tends to be politically incorrect, you may not say it. But when it comes time to vote, or when you're talking to me on a private chat room, you may be a different person. They have access to how the public thinks, and these are important issues for them. So, there are many decisions that are based on that.
Right. Mr. Akram, now this particular statement by the Chinese President Xi Jinping during this particular interaction with Joe Biden, China is ready to work with the new US administration to maintain communication, expand cooperation and manage differences so as to strive for a smooth transition of the China-US relationship. How do you analyze that?
Yes, because Chinese are here for business, because Chinese have spent more than $1 trillion US for the infrastructure of Belt and Road Initiative, roads and railway and maritime networks. So now this is the time to start the trade. So as comparing the Biden administration and Trump administration, I would say that the Trump administration would suit China, because during the last Trump administration, he did not started any war. He did not backed any war. And for China right now, anywhere the security issues or the wars would hamper their Belt and Road Initiative program. We see the Russia-Ukraine war. It has badly hampered China's few corridors which were passing through Russia and Ukraine to on the European side. There is one corridor which China has made from China, Mongolia, Russia and going towards Europe. That corridor work has already stopped since last 2 or 3 years. So if Trump is placing sanctions, Trump is giving statements to China, China would agree on that. China would keep low on that. As far as
there won't be any retaliation, as Mr.
There
Khan
will
has
be retaliation, but the retaliation will only be restricted on the US front also. But if there are new wars, if there are new campaigns started in Middle East, or a war started in Iran or something like that, that would essentially hamper China's Belt and Road Initiative, because China has practically put in their everything in this project. And now if new wars are started in the region, in Middle East, or the Ukraine war continues for more time, that is going to waste China's money which they have been spending on the Belt and Road Initiative. So for them, the new administration, they would not only be looking America internally, but they would also be looking the American policies all over the world. And during the last 4 years of Trump, at least there were no new campaigns, there were no new wars, there were no new US-backed war-like initiatives. So that suited China, because in that time, China was able to expand its Belt and Road program to many countries. They were able to connect the countries together, and this is what Chinese aim is, to connect the countries together and to trade. Recently China had their import exhibition in Shanghai, and almost 152 countries participated in that, including America. So China is open to all trade, China is open to all connectivity, China is open for all kind of this relationship. And during the Trump tenure, at least they will have a sigh of relief that if Trump can stop the Ukraine war or have a peaceful settlement in the Middle East, that would help China in expanding their Belt and Road Initiative.
Right. One last question, very important thing. Now, very important points, Mr. Khan, has been made by President Xi Jinping. One of those points is to the importance not to challenge the red lines and paramount principles. Now, it is also talked about what are the red lines for China: the Taiwan question, democracy and human rights, China's path and system, and China's development right are 4 red lines for China. Likewise, in that very interaction, what President Joe Biden says is that the United States does not seek a new Cold War. It does not seek a change China's system. Its alliances are not targeted against China. It does not support Taiwan independence. It does not see conflict with China, and it does not see its Taiwan policy as the way to compete with China. How do you look at both of these?
All that sounds very nice.
It seems music to the ear, but the practicalities are different.
Yes, exactly.
That is what the second point has been made by Xi Jinping, that the words must match with actions.
Indeed, that is my point. That, you know, when 2 leaders meet on the sidelines of a major conference, often there are courtesies that are exchanged and there are words that are exchanged. At the end of the day, what matters is action that needs to be taken. Because, for example, we were just discussing CPEC. Unfortunately, the United States has stated openly to Pakistan that they are not in favor of CPEC. Whereas China, I'm not taking sides, but they have clearly said to us that they would welcome American investment in CPEC, in the SEZs. And I feel that if there is an opportunity for American businessmen not only to make healthy profits and expatriate, send them back to the United States, but also such investments can create job opportunities within the United States. So in that respect, policy ought to change. Look at the policy they have towards India. India continues to buy oil from Russia, in fact is refining it and sending it, selling it in Europe. Okay? Now, as far as American intentions or a strategic alliance with India is concerned, it will obviously include massive investments into the Indian economy. And in a case like that, when their neighborhood has a long-standing issue, that issue ought to be resolved. So if America wants India to be a strategic ally, America must make efforts to improve relationships between India and Pakistan. And America must come to Pakistan to invest in projects which are win-win situations from both sides.
Right.
So, you know, saying things at meetings is one thing,
Right.
but being practical about it is something that, you know, we have to wait and see.
Right, Mr. Akram, your quick last take regarding as to what could be the Chinese options if during Trump administration these particular red lines are not taken care of.
China, as I say, that China will take stringent actions. China is going to play a tit-for-tat game, because I think China is now in a economically in a position where they can twist arm, where they can put restrictions on their companies for going to US. They can put the restrictions on the companies within China, the US companies, that they can't take their money out of China. So they can put some economic restrictions on US, which are going to be very, very hard for US. So I think both countries need to have a rational approach, and they should come up with a solution which will have a win-win situation for both of them.
Mr. Khalid Taimur, Akram International Relations expert, thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, former ambassador, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.